Hello and welcome to this day 26 quest for 2000 rating on chess.com. And this is the game review. If you missed the game, be sure to check out the previous video where I actually played the game and explained my moves as I was playing. And it was a pretty interesting game. So now we're going to do a game review and then analysis to see what we both missed, what the computer finds. All right, so I'm hitting the game review button here, and let's see. Okay. Oh, well, I ended up pretty good on the accuracy for that one. Anytime I get in the 90s, I'm happy with that. So 93.3 on the accuracy versus their 85.4. So they played pretty strong as well with 85.4. Anything in the mid, well, even the 80s can be, a pretty solid game. I'm usually happy with scoring in the 80s and especially the 90s. So we each had one great move. It looks like they had 4 inaccuracies and 3 mistakes. And then we just had 1 miss. So, I'm pretty happy with that. All right, we'll do the review and it kind of blasts through these moves. And then I'll go slower with the analysis afterwards. Okay, so I played the Grunfeld exchange variation. And it ended up with this position here. And here, I think the game, this was, the last book move was this here. And I looked it up. It looks like next I should have played queen to a5 to put more pressure on this unprotected pawn and, try to knock out their center a little bit here. And it also pins this pawn to the king so that, if we capture, they can't recapture with the pawn and have a strong pawn center, which I allowed them to do in the game, as we'll see. So the next key move, let's see. All right, yeah, it just blasted through the moves. And now it says bishop to h6 in this position was a mistake, and that it's 1.27 in black's favor after this move. Oh, and I think this is because I was able to pick off a pawn, come out a pawn ahead in this. But it says bishop to g5, just attacking my queen would have been better. So we'll take a look at all that in the analysis. So here, I was able to find the best move, picking off this pawn. And so, if the queen just goes ahead and captures here, well, then I would be able to pick this bishop off and keep my bishop pair. So let's see here. Then we have a series of exchanges, and they play this move, which is also a mistake here. And I probably didn't have the best response. This is probably where, looks like where I had a miss. And in the game, I was thinking about this position here, and I just wasn't sure exactly how to play it out. So it looks like, that's a mistake. It overlooks an opportunity to recapture a piece. So they should have just captured here with their queen instead of capturing with the rook. So that was the miss. I shouldn't have recaptured with the bishop. So another point we'll definitely have to take a look at. Now, queen to f4 is a mistake. Again, it says this ignores a better way to defend this pawn. It looks like they should have just, I guess, moved their bishop here. So, that's kind of interesting. But then I guess I could have blocked that pawn and given them a bad bishop. But then, they could move their g-pawn back up and then eventually get this pawn moving. All right, so moving on. Here we're just ahead now, by 3, the equivalent of 3 pawns worth of material. So, all right. and it just continues on until the pawns were marching up. This pawn was marching up the board, and they wouldn't be able to stop it. All right. Well, yeah, I'm definitely happy with that game. If I played at a 2250 level, I wish I could play more games like that. So they played at 1850, which is still pretty solid. So it says you really outplayed your opponent in that one. Both of you played an amazing opening. It was a well fought middle game that you got the better of. Your accurate end game play outshined your opponent. So they played 100% opening accuracy. I played 100% opening accuracy. So then they played 74.2 in the middle game, and I played 86.8. And then in the end game, they played 86.5. Oh my gosh. And then I played 99.2 in the end game. All right. Well, I wish I could have more games at that level. Okay. So now let's take a look at the analysis, and we'll figure out, what we could have done better here. So the game began with d4, which is more. This usually leads to more strategic openings, but then again, no matter what opening you play, it depends how you steer the game. It can end up being more tactical or more strategic, depending on how you continue. But in general, d4 is a little more strategic than if you would play e4, and that's more tactical usually. All right, so we play knight to f6, and this move helps control the center. It keeps them from being able to push their e pawn here, and it eyes the d5 square, so you can push this d pawn and it'll be protected. So now they play c4 because if you can't put both of your center pawns out, then it's usually a good idea to put the c pawn out. So you have two pawns side by side, and they do a good job of controlling a lot of central squares. And also now they can bring the knight in behind that pawn without blocking it in. So I start out kind of like a King's Indian defense, where you bring this pawn up, get ready to fianchetto. And in the King's Indian, you could castle quickly and usually put this pawn on d6. But this game goes into the Grunfeld, which brings this pawn up to d5 instead. So they play knight to c3, which helps prepare the push of this e pawn, so they can have all three of these pawns in the center controlling a lot of squares. So the difference between the King's Indian defense, where you play d6, that allows white to take a big controlling interest in the center by pushing all three of these pawns forward. Although in this exchange variation they did get a pretty strong center, but we were able to counterattack it. So d5 here, this kind of stops them from bringing this e4 pawn up immediately, but they go ahead and capture the more valuable d pawn with this slightly less valuable c pawn here. And then we're forced to capture with the knight, and now they push their other pawn. So they end up with a strong pawn center anyway, but we're able to exchange off one of their pieces, which I did a video, I believe it was the last video, or excuse me, not the last one, but the one I released on the first, and that video was about how to use space in your chess games to win, and how to use space in chess for an advantage. So white, because they push their pawns forward here, they have more space in the center here. And whatever side has more space, usually you want to exchange off material, because if their pawns are pushed far forward, they could become a little harder to protect, because they have less pieces to protect those pawns as they advance forward. So they capture. Now they have this strong central pawn formation. And then we just develop our bishop here on the diagonal, kind of lining up here on the center, and even eyeing this rook if we're able to knock these pawns out of the way. So they develop their knight, and we're still all in book moves here. So standard moves, knight is developed to help fortify the center even more. And then we play this move, c5, which immediately counterattacks the center here, because you don't want to just let white sit here with this very strong central pawn formation. If you can force it to move, or try and pick off some of this center, it can help counter what white is doing here in the middle of the board. So they just develop with bishop to e3 here, which helps fortify the center even more. Now, in the game at this point, I wasn't quite sure what the best move was, and so I didn't play the best move. I played, well, what I should have played was queen to a5 here. So that is the number one move that I should have played, because it continues putting pressure on the center. It immediately attacks this unprotected pawn here. It kind of lines up on the king, keeps an eye on this isolated pawn, which could be a weakness here. So that is what I should have played moving forward in the game. And then it looks like the computer recommends bishop to d2 here, which, that would kind of protect the pawn and eye the queen here. So that is how the game should have gone. All right, so now going back to what was actually played, at this point I wasn't sure. And as I mentioned, I'm still working on all my opening repertoire and trying to figure out the best moves and remember them. So we captured here, which, I guess it does knock out a pawn, but they're just going to recapture, and then white will be left with a strong central pawn formation. And here the computer is actually recommending bishop to g4 as well, saying that that is the best move. But queen to a5 was recommended, and the computer even said that. If we go back, yeah, here the computer says, oh, okay, I see, they're about equal. Excuse me, bishop to g4 and queen to a5. And I did even think about trying to pin the knight in the game while I was playing, but I was kind of worried about a possible weakness on this pawn since it was on an open file. I mean, I guess I could push it forward here, but then that would block the path of my queen. So bishop to g4 is also a possibility. All right, so in the game we had capture, then they recaptured, of course, which is best, and now white is ahead by about half a pawn's worth of material. They're controlling the center very well here, although we do have this bishop eyeing the pawn and lining up on the rook. So we just go ahead and castle here. And now once again, it's recommending this queen to a5 move, which is interesting because, I mean, I guess they could just block with their bishop and attack the queen. So let's see. Queen to a5, bishop to d2, and then it recommends just moving back to d8. So that's interesting, I guess. All right, well, what happened in the game? So they just develop. We go ahead and develop our knight to c6, which is good, but once again, it wants queen to a5. With knight to c6, they are now 3/4 of a pawn worth of material ahead. Let's see. So now h3, which I mean, I guess that's to prevent an attack on the knight with this bishop, which is kind of closed in here, and it has to do something. You know, this just limits the scope of the bishop. Now, where is it going to go? It can't go here, can't go here. If it goes here, then we have a possible fork. But we have to remember that this bishop is lined up on the rook. But what I really want to give up this bishop, which is defending my king, for the rook, and then a possible attack with the bishop here and the queen lined up here. That could be dangerous. So e6 is what I played just to stop any forward movement in the future of this d pawn. And once again, the computer wants queen to a5. So now we have castling by white, which is best. We go ahead and play b6, which the computer says is best, because now we can go ahead and fianchetto this bishop and get it off the back rank. This move by the pawn did leave the knight unprotected, so they play rook to c1, which is best, and we just go ahead fianchetto, which is best, and protect the knight. And also we're lining up on this unprotected pawn here, and also the king side. All right, so they put more pressure on this knight, so now we have to do something about that. We could move it, but why not just develop this rook here to the open file, and which from there it'll be able to fight for control of this open file. But the computer says that better would have been knight here to a5. So that's an interesting call by the computer. Knight to a5. I guess the computer probably wouldn't want to give up the bishop pair, but if we moved here, would he be able to drop back? Probably not, because there's a lot of pressure building up on this pawn right here with the queen, the knight, the bishop. All right, so we just put our rook on the open file, which is still a good move. And now we have the queen creating a battery of queen and bishop here, which is usually a good strategy to knock out this defending bishop here that's fianchettoed. But the computer says that's an inaccuracy, that d5 would have been better. So it took us all the way to move 15 for the first inaccuracy, or the first move that's highlighted. So this queen to d2 move, we could look at what is recommended, and that is d5. So, and it's funny, now it's saying queen to e2. So let's play d5 and see what it says about that. So here it just says that that's best. So after that, it recommends, let's see, capturing, and the game would be even. And here, this is interesting. It gives you the option of either capturing back, but then white will be left with this isolated pawn. And in the isolated pawn position, if too many pieces are exchanged, that isolated pawn could become a weakness in the endgame, because there won't be very many pieces to protect it as it tries to move up the board, and it could become a target. So here it recommends another option, bishop to g5, attacking the queen, and then with that, just blocking with our own bishop and then capturing this pawn. So pretty interesting. Let's see. Before we dive, I don't want to dive too deep into some of this stuff. Let's move on. All right, so queen to d2, and then we play a6, forcing this bishop to make a decision. Once again, the computer prefers knight to a5 here, which is interesting. But, a6 is still good. So now we have the bishop retreat to e2, but the computer prefers bishop to c4, saying that's best. And after this bishop to e2 move, which is maybe more passive, at least on bishop to c4, well, I guess the one bad thing about bishop to c4, then we could move to knight to a5 and attack that bishop. Let's see. So if they move bishop to c4, then it actually recommends knight to e7. So it's very interesting how just little changes in the position really change what move is best. So, that's one thing that makes chess so interesting and difficult. All right, so bishop to e2, retreating. And now we push forward, and this is the best move. We bring this pawn up, hoping that our pawn majority will be able to push through and create a passed pawn in the future. So now we have this move, bishop to h6, and that is a mistake in the game. So let's see, bishop to g5 would have been better. So if we go back, bishop to g5, attacking the queen, and then the recommended option is to just move the queen to one of three different places at least here, either d6, d7, or even queen to a5, attacking the opponent's queen. So that's pretty interesting. All right, well, let's see what happened after they made this mistake. So they move here, which usually this is a decent strategy of trying to trade off this defender of the king here, but they left this pawn vulnerable in the center. And so it looks like the best move now is to capture that pawn in the center with the knight, which is how the game continued. And then they recaptured with their knight. And now it's saying it would have been better to capture with the rook here. So, but, this knight capture is still good. And now we have a capture here, which is best, attacking the queen. Okay, and now it looks like the queen immediately capturing is best. But they play a move. They play this rook capture here, and it says that is a mistake. And it looks like now black should be winning. But and then at this point in the game, I remember really thinking like, well, what should I do here? And I wasn't sure how to recapture. So, at this point, if we look at the material, let's see, what is it here? They are +4 ahead, is that correct? Yes, because they just captured a rook. So it looks like the best move is to just go ahead and capture here. Capture the queen. And I thought about that move. But then I wasn't sure if that was good. So maybe I saw ghosts in the game and I just wasn't quite sure. So let's see here. And I do remember thinking, well, should I just capture their queen? And I guess they would have to capture my queen and then I would recapture. And then I would just have the bishop pair, I guess. So let's take a look at it. Rook captures, and now, well, first let's see what they should have done. I think we already took a look at that. So yes, they should have just captured with the queen here, and then we have queen takes d4, And then the game would be black ahead by 1 pawn here. So we're ahead by 1 pawn, and we have this majority here on the queen side. So as we exchange off pieces, that could be to black's favor with this pawn majority on the queen side. So now it's just saying, and this pawn's under attack, and they recommend just protecting with the bishop here. All right, so let's go back to see what happened in the game. They captured our rook, and then we misplayed this. We missed and just captured with our bishop, when what we should have done is captured here. And then, they would have to capture our rook, and then we would capture. And let's see here. Now it's saying knight to b3 is the best option to just go ahead and attack this bishop. So knight to b3. So we'll take a look at this. Knight to b3, and now bishop to b4, because we don't want to give up our bishop pair. So bishop to b4. So this is how the game could have gone, with the bishop pair and a pawn majority. Let's see, now it's saying just f3. But they do have this bad bishop that's kind of locked in here, so they have to figure out what to do about that. And now, let's see. Here it's interesting. It recommends rook to c8 and rook to d1, and then just king up here to g7. All right, well, I don't want to go too deep, too much more into that. So let's look at what happened in the game. So after rook captures, we misplayed it. We end up just capturing with the bishop. So black is still ahead here, but not as much. And now we have, well, one thing this did is kept queens on the board. So they go ahead and capture, which the computer says is a great move. And then we go ahead and capture, and it says that's a great move. And let's see here. Now, queen to f4 is played next, but it says queen to c1 is the best move. So let's take a look at that. Queen to c1. It looks like that should have been played, which I guess it brings the queen back here, and it kind of helps. Well, it stays in the vicinity of this pawn, so you're not giving that up. It prevents this fork of the a pawn and the bishop here. But this would be unprotected. So the best move now would be to just capture this pawn. So I guess we could take a look at it. Capture. But then you have bishop to f3 possible. And here it also recommended e4. Or sorry, e5, pushing the e pawn. But these moves were about the same. But now you would have this. That's the downside of capturing that pawn. Now this bishop is more active. The queen could move to b4 here. Staying on a dark square, and also remaining near these pawns to help start pushing them forward. Let's see here. And now rook to d1, trying to take control of this open file and preventing our rook from going there. And now e5 is recommended. And then bishop to d5, no, a3, just attacking the queen. Anyway, that's how the game could have progressed. And before we go too far, let's take a look here at what happened. Capture, capture, capture. And then they played queen to f4, which is a mistake. And it looks like e5 now is the best move. So this gives us time to attack. So we play e5, which is best, attacking the queen, locking this pawn here on the light squares, which will block this bishop now and keep this as a bad bishop blocked in by its own colored, or its pawn on its own colored squares, or the same color as the bishop. All right, so now queen to h4 is played, and this is an inaccuracy. It looks like better would have been queen to f6. Well, that's interesting. Oh no, okay, that's not bad. I was thinking queen to e3 here, which I could just capture and double his pawns up. But queen to f6 looks like it prefers that, and then it recommends just capturing on e4. So we just grab another pawn. Now we're attacking the bishop, but it allows the bishop to attack our queen. And now queen to f5, just offering an exchange of the queens here. All right, so in the game, after this move, queen to f4, we attack their queen. So they move here, which is an inaccuracy. I guess maybe they're thinking about, well, I don't know what the idea behind this is. I guess to be able to swing down here somewhere and cause problems. But this allows us to develop our bishop. Now we're attacking this pawn. It looks like queen to b2 immediately would have been better, to just go ahead and fork the bishop and the pawn. So they attack us, which is best. And now we go ahead and fork the pawn and the bishop. So they play bishop to g4, which is an inaccuracy. So better would have been, let's see. Now the computer's undecided. It's saying either bishop to f1, bishop to g4, or bishop to f3. But in the game, we had this. And so now it looks like capturing, which is what I did, is the second best move. That it would have been better to just go ahead and capture this pawn immediately. Okay, that makes sense, because if I capture this, well then I'm guarding this bishop, so if they capture me, my queen can just swing down here, protect this pawn, and my king as well. So I capture, which is still an excellent move, the computer says. And they capture with the pawn, which is best. And I thought maybe they were going to try and, I don't know, push this pawn forward, get their king moved up, and swing their rook over here and try something on the h-file. But maybe that would take too long. So we have queen captures a2, which is best. And now this, rook to d8, which is an inaccuracy, offering to exchange even more material. So better would have been, and so when you're behind in material, so if we look at the position, they have 4 pawns and we have 6. So you don't want to offer to trade any more material, but maybe he was thinking about trying to get a draw. If I would have captured this and then his queen captures with check and I move up here to g7, maybe he wanted to put this pawn here and bring his queen in, try and get a draw by repetition. But okay, I'm not going to go into that before I veer off on another sideline. Okay, queen captures here, which is best. And now the best move is queen to e7. So queen to e7. F6 is second best, or just f3 to protect these pawns. But queen to e7, what does that do? I guess it attacks this pawn. And so after queen to e7, recommended is queen to e2 to just counterattack the rook. All right. Well, I guess we could take a quick look at that. So queen to e7, and then recommended is queen to e2 or c2, but attacking the rook. And now rook to a1. But what if they went here? I guess we could take a look at that. If they drop this rook down here, is that going to be a problem? Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't like that move at all, because now it's saying to just go ahead and capture that rook. Then the queen would capture with check, and then we would just move up to here. And then well, I guess we could play that out. Capture. Queen captures. King to g7. And now what? Queen to a5 is recommended. Well, what if they attack this? With something like that. What does that allow? That would be a mistake. Oh, okay. Excuse me. They can't do that, and I didn't mean that. I meant to go here to d5. Okay, so let's get rid of that move. All right, so I was thinking, well, what if they do that? Well, now, let's see. Oh, I guess here they can just go to queen to b2 and guard that pawn, and there would be no problems, and black would just be winning. Okay, let's finish this out. So after rook to d8, we check here. And let me go back a few moves so we can get back into what happened in the game. So capture, pawn captures. We capture a pawn on a2. They attack our rook. We ignore that and check them, which is best. They move, and then we pick off another pawn, which is best. They go ahead and capture, which is excellent, but the computer prefers g3. So now we pick off that, and then we have a check here on d8. And the computer says that's good, but capturing the pawn is preferred, and that's what I thought they were going to do. So if we take a look at that, queen captures here. Well, what does it say? We should play queen to d4. Queen to d4. All right. Is there any reason we wouldn't just pick this off? Queen to d4. Oh, okay. Because they could attack and then pick that pawn off. And so we wouldn't want to do that. We want to guard this pawn in the center. So queen to d4 guards that pawn, and it threatens this pawn. It could help us push our pawn forward. And now it's saying king to e7 would have been better. So the computer is unsure here. But after queen to h8 check, now we have queen to e7. And what does white do now? Let's see. Queen to b8. And now what? Queen to d6. So my opponent could have given me more of an issue, to try and chase me around if they would have played this variation. Okay, so back to the game. Capture, they check. We just jump up here to safety, but now we have g5. So now they're threatening check and a perpetual check back and forth here. So in order to avoid that, we check here with queen to f4 check, which is best. And now, they can't do that. They can't go up here, or we'll just capture their queen. All right, so they play king to g1, which is best. And now we just push forward to get rid of this pawn. But the computer says that's excellent, but it prefers just an immediate check. All right, well, they capture, which is best. We capture with the queen, which is best. And they move here to prevent a check on c1, and they're targeting this a pawn. So now we just push our pawn forward, which is the best move. And so they capture, and that's best, of course. But now this is a dangerous passed pawn. And so we move our queen up here to be able to protect that pawn, possibly to check the king here or here. And then we can also swing back to here to c3 to guard this diagonal, and especially this pawn, so that the queen can't capture this pawn with check and start chasing our king around. So this is an important diagonal here to keep the king safe, to make sure you protect that and prevent checks by the queen. So queen to b6 is excellent, but queen to b5 would be a little bit better. So now we move here, which will help us escort this pawn forward, and also keeps an eye on the diagonal and this pawn here. So the king just moves. I was wondering if they would play queen to a4, because then I couldn't push this pawn, or they would just go ahead and pick my queen off. It would pin the pawn. So no, and it's saying now queen to a5 would be the best move, and that's what I thought they would do, is go here to pin that pawn. But I guess then I could just move here to b2 and get this pawn moving up one more square. So in the game, they move their king, and I pushed this pawn, and they resigned at this point, thinking that there's no way to stop that pawn. And the game may have continued, according to the computer, with queen here attacking this pawn, even though it's protected by the queen. And now it's saying that we should push this, that pawn push would be good. So that's interesting. Well, I guess then, well, I don't know. All right, let's see what the computer has in mind. Queen to b7, attacking. And then now we can drop back, protect this pawn, protect the diagonal, and get ready to push this pawn up even further. So now the king moves. We push this pawn, and we're also protecting. So I don't know. This is just interesting stuff here. And it's saying, well, also the computer's now saying we should have just checked and just marched this pawn up more. All right, so capture, capture. And there's no way to get on this diagonal right now by the queen. So we're checking. He's got to move his king. So anyway, you get the point. This pawn will be unstoppable here. You just move your queen over, protect this diagonal, start pushing that pawn forward, and there's no way that white can stop that. All right, everybody. I'll end it there. I hope you enjoyed this game review and analysis in day 26 in this quest for a 2000 rating. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions or any requests. And thank you all for watching, and have a super chess day.